there. This is Beth Ann Kelsch. Welcome to First Fridays. This is, we're very excited. Pride of the community. That's pride with an exclamation point. The two of my colleagues who are running it. What it is it's a community collection documenting LGBTQ history in the Triad. It's the first large-scale initiative of its kind, and Stacy and Krim and David Gwynn will be talking about. Stacy Krim is an archivist, and David Krim, wow. David Gwynn is the digital projects coordinator. So hello, welcome. Let's talk. Tell me all about it.
Okay, well, I'm going to pull up a little presentation and you're welcome to talk and ask questions as we go along.
And I'm going to compliment Beth Ann's feather boa and say I would be wearing one of my Queer Nation t-shirts from 1989, but Stacy made me donate them all.
Stacy is a manuscript cure. Yeah, she has her way. Stacy went out and got herself a bright rainbow, so she's participating.
I am for a little while, but I always view rainbows as being very cheerful, and I don't want to misrepresent my personality to people.
Right. Well, honesty. Okay. So tell us all about it.
All right.
There's our intro slide. So Stacy, you want to jump in, or do I jump in on the first slide? I can't.
Oh, you go ahead and talk about the background.
Okay, I will talk about the background, and you will see the background goes back all the way to 2018, which is when we started this project. And you might ask why? Why did we start it? And that's because we wanted to document underserved triad communities in general. And we recognize that the historical record of the LGBTQ plus community in Greensboro, of which I am a part, was very much lacking. And as such, we wanted to change that. So way back when, Jennifer Motzko and I applied for an NEH grant to do some of this documentation. We also worked with Stacy on this. And we partnered with the Guilford Green Foundation, which is a local philanthropic organization and social organization in Greensboro, which was really cool because they gave us sort of a built-in audience. And originally, this was about trying to get people to let us scan their photos and their records, et cetera. We were hoping that we were going to have all kinds of really great community scanning days and digitized stuff. But eventually, it sort of evolved into a big oral history project instead. With which we also did community exhibits and outreach. But the oral histories in many cases led to more material that we could actually digitize and put online too, which was kind of cool. And now it's a lot of things that we're going to try to show you what these are over the next half hour or so. So why is this important and difficult? That's the next line I had, because it's hard to deal with underserved communities. They have historically not been part of the record. And we're trying to do that. And one of the ways we're starting, and we'll dig deep into some of our rationale maybe a little bit later in the presentation too, is with social life. Bars have been a spot for social gathering and also for the spread of news on politics and healthcare, that particularly, as you might guess, in the 80s and 90s, and activism over the years. They're gathering spaces. They're where people learn about things. They're where you meet people. That said, they're not for everyone. Gay bars, particularly gay bars in the South, tend to be very one size fits all, or as some of us would call it, one size fits none, and to serve only a specific segment of the population. And to be honest, not everyone finds them to be inviting or safe spaces. But so we also want to stress they're not the only social options that were available in the Triad at this time. As you see this one on screen right now, going back to 1986, shows a lot of the options that were going on in Greensboro at the time, from volleyball to Sunday services at the Metropolitan Community Church, to group meetings for different organizations, and wow, bars too. Good figure. So go to the next slide, please. Because that's what I do, this is sort of a geography of gay bars in Greensboro over the past 60 years or so. There are a lot more details about these bars and these locations on the website, which is linked multiple times through the presentation. But I will say the first known gay bar in Greensboro was a place called the General Green Grill, which was on North Green Street, in the block, I think, between Friendly and Belmead, I believe, right near the Elon Law School, etc. And it opened in the early 1960s. It was a diner, cafe, bar kind of place, or bar and grill, if you will. And by all accounts, it was kind of a rough place. If you've ever read John Ritchie novels, it was sort of like what you would see in one of his novels. There were drag queens, there were sex workers of all genders and orientations, and there was actually a fair amount of violence and crime going on in this place. There were most of the news reports you read are about fights or what seems obvious in retrospect were pickups that went horribly wrong, but were not described as such in the newspapers at the time. But next slide, please. But the scene pretty much took off in the 1960s, and this is the first of an awful lot of hair you're going to see over the course of the next few minutes. The scene took off in the 70s with a bar called the Renaissance on Battleground Avenue, which many of you might know is where Boo Radley's is today. There were some others too, including I think one called the Libra Lounge, which is where I believe the historian John D'Amelio landed when he first came into Greensboro, but just decided that Greensboro was a big enough city to have a bar, so it was okay to be here. Am I thinking of the right person here, Stacey? I hope.
Yeah, when he was looking to see if he wanted to come down and teach at UNCG, he wanted to see if we had a gay bar, and we actually had two. So he felt, even though he was not a gay bar frequenter, he felt that represented enough of a population he would feel comfortable.
David, are there distinct personalities? Like, for example, was there a place for lesbians to go?
Well, actually, yes, in fact, there were. I'll start by saying a lot of the bars developed kind of a family atmosphere over the years. Now, the Renaissance got some rare newspaper coverage of its holiday dinners in the early 70s. It was not mentioned as a gay bar, but it was mentioned. The Palms in Greensboro, actually, for most of its existence, was owned and managed by a lesbian, and originally started out and had a large female population, and some men as well. It was a great bar in its early days. I liked it a lot because it was kind of divey and wasn't as flashy keen as the other bars in town. It still had a jukebox, and it was kind of cool. It got all fancy later on, and when it sort of became the option in town. But that was probably early on the one that was most known as a lesbian bar. And then later there was a bar here called the Time Out, which also I think had a largely female clientele, which is interesting because it moved into the side of another bar called Busby's, which had a very decidedly male clientele beforehand. So the image you see on screen here is from XTC, which was a bar which was on High Point Road, or now Gate City Boulevard, in the 80s. Again, very family atmosphere. This was a very drag-centered bar, actually, and it was a very mixed male and female clientele while it was open. You see the third from the left, there's a drag queen there by the name of Marilyn Rivers, who we have a really good oral history interview with on the site. But on the far right, there's also an employee who I remember and knew well too, because I worked at this bar for a little while, called Racine, and she was trans. One of the first people I think that a lot of people in Greensboro knew who was trans, and was actually in the process of transitioning in the late 80s when she was working at XTC. So, and there were other bars in Greensboro too. I mentioned Busby's before, I think, that were actually run by people of a more activist bent. Many of the bars sort of avoided politics, but Randall Busby, who owned Busby's, was very activist in his orientation toward things. And in fact, the Triad Health Project, one of the first AIDS service organizations, was established by people that were meeting in his bar to set it up. Next slide, please. I'll breathe for questions if you want while we look at this big posterior in our face here.
Yeah, I will say, well, David's looking through chat. We've been using some of the newspapers, the front page that has a lot of these advertisements in them that we have digitized. So the students have actually been having an interesting time seeing what this advertisement, what kind of gay-centered advertisement looked like in the 80s, which was a first for them. They've never thought of that.
Yeah, the ads, particularly in the 80s, were very male and very drag focused. As Patrick said, very Tom of Finland, a lot of other advertisements, particularly for the power company, which yes, had their main bar was in Durham, but they also had a bar in Winston-Salem and one in Raleigh for a little while as well. They tended to be, I don't know, what I would call Duran chic. It was very, very, they were very 80s, or Bowie in his 80s period kind of ads. Notice also, though, the membership cards. The membership cards were a big important part of this thing in the 80s. They were required. A bar to serve liquor in North Carolina has to be either a private club or to make, I think, more than 51% of its revenue from food. That regulation is enforced differently among different types of bars, and it was much more closely enforced at this time in gay bars because they had a lot of ABC watching over them. So the gay bar membership cards were important because you needed one to get in, or if you didn't have one, you had to get someone to sign you into the bar. They were also kind of a subtle way to let people know that saw you peeling through your wallet that, yeah, you're gay. You may feel free to talk to me. Yeah, there were a weird little coded ID thing, sort of like the matchbooks were, which I don't think we have any of on here. But they also, the membership requirement provided some security against troublemakers coming into the bars, that kind of thing as well. So again, we have an interview with Marilyn Rivers, who's a local, and talks about Lily White, who's a drag queen who later was in Atlanta, but it was in Greensboro for many years as an inspiration for kind of an alternative version of drag that was less about the glamour, but more about the humor and the rock and roll aspects, etc. So next slide, please. And let's hope. Oh, I was already supposed to be on this slide. That's okay. You see Lily White here. So I guess pageants already were big as well. Let's go to the next slide. See if we can make this work. Hopefully you'll get the audio.
All right. Everybody saw 1001 Dalmatians, right? You know, in their version, Cruella kidnapped the puppies, right? Yeah. Well, in our version, she ate them. Welcome to the stage as Cruella DeVille, Paisley Park.
I hate the world today. Feels so good to me, I know, but I can't change. Tried to tell you, but you look at me like maybe I'm an angel underneath, innocent and sweet. Yesterday I cried, must have been relieved to see the softer side. I can understand how you'd be so confused. I don't envy you, I'm a little bit of everything.
Fabulous.
Wow, Stacy, you have to follow that up.
I know. It's
All right.
frightening. All right, so someone who kind of really got on to the drag phenomenon and who's been a tremendous supporter in the Greensboro area is the Guilford Green Foundation. So Guilford Green started as the Green Party, which was a committee that formed basically to raise money for different LGBTQ causes in the area. And they started in 1998. So they raised money for the Triad Health Project and for the Guilford Religious Interfaith Network. And then as AIDS and HIV care became more prominent, they felt the need to organize even more. And out of that was born the nonprofit, the Guilford Green Foundation. I will say UNCG has been the recipient of many Guilford Green Foundation grants, including the Safe Zone program was grant funded for many, many years through Guilford Green. And they were actually our partners on this project. Another great social organization in our area is the Triad Pride Performing Arts Group. It started out as a men's chorus, and in 2018, they added a women's chorus, and later they added a theater component to it. And this chorus and group was created basically just to entertain and promote equality and social justice for everyone. You don't have to be a member of the LGBTQ community to be a part of this, although if you're singing, you should probably at least be a decent singer. So if many of you probably are aware of their annual holiday celebrations, which I have attended a few of those and they were wonderful. And they are a member of the Gay and Lesbian Association of Choruses, which is a national organization. And here we have an oral history with Will Sutherland, who was the artistic director and conductor of the chorus up until roughly before COVID. Now they have someone new. Will went off to go conduct elsewhere. But that was a really fabulous interview. It was one of our first. So moving on to health, one of the major organizations working with LGBTQ health in our area is the Triad Health Project. And that was a grassroots effort among 14 friends who met in 1986 in a bar, I think Busby's, and they met to figure out how to deal with the HIV and AIDS problem in Greensboro. And that's not only the fact that people were getting AIDS and HIV, but also the discrimination they faced in employment and in the healthcare field. They are still in existence today. And since that time, they have become one of the largest AIDS service organizations in North Carolina. And these are two of the founders, Johnny McGee and Bruce Teedy. We did an oral history with them. There were like many cats in that oral history, but Hyacinth was probably the most friendly, so you get to see her. So that was one of the most heart-wrenching oral histories when you think of what it was like to be working with people in the 80s during this period, to see so many people dying around you and to have to work with organizations to try to stop discrimination and get healthcare. So Bruce and Johnny worked a lot with the Cone Medical Center to try to educate them on AIDS and HIV, so that way their patients would not have to face the same sort of discrimination that people have had to face elsewhere. And in their retirement, actually, now that they're not working with the Triad Health Project, they are fostering and adopting FIV positive cats. So they still have their hand in that a little bit. Another great organization was the Alternative Resources of the Triad. They produced a newsletter. Communication was really important in the 80s and 90s. We didn't have the internet, so how do you find other people and how do you get reasonable information? And that was primarily through these grassroots efforts, ephemera, newsletters, and such. So through these newsletters, we have several of them in the collection. You can see updates, you can see information that would be of concern. One of the great features is we finally got some statistics out of these. So you could see they funded a hotline for LGBTQ people in the area. And you can get to see the topics that were discussed, the varieties of people who were contacting them. You can see that isolation and loneliness was a huge problem, which is why the dissemination of these newsletters was so important. Moving on to social justice, of course, we have to include that. One of my favorite collections that we actually have in our manuscripts collection is the Marnie Thompson papers. And Marnie Thompson was one of the founders of the Guilford Alliance for Gay and Lesbian Equality, GAGL. And GAGL was created in August of 1987. And it was really the first entirely political and social justice oriented organization in our area, focusing on LGBTQ rights. And its membership really picked up after the first LGBTQ gay rights march on Washington in 1987 as well. So they had around 340 people on their mailing list in 1987. Around 100 people were on their paid membership. And what's interesting is that around 15% of the membership was non-gay people. So you're at least seeing heterosexual people interested in what's going on and trying to be aware of what's happening. GAGL was involved with advocating for LGBTQ rights in Greensboro, which was quite the issue in the 80s. And if I am correct, David's about to talk a little bit about some of their initiatives.
One in particular that actually involved a lot of the groups in Greensboro at the time was getting a non-discrimination ordinance through the Greensboro City Council in 1989. And by non-discrimination ordinance, I'm not talking about a sweeping ordinance that affected the whole city. This ordinance actually would have applied only to city employees. So it was basically stating that the city of Greensboro would not discriminate in hiring or the workplace, which even at that fairly minimal level made it the first municipality in North Carolina, as I recall, to actually contemplate doing this. And in fact, the ordinance did pass in 1989, but go to the next slide, please. About a week later, there was a backlash, and the council pulled back and said, no, maybe we're not going to do this anymore. So I don't know how we are on time. Do we have time to do the news?
Yeah, we can. I think we could do the news and just cut out a little bit. You think this video is going to be less fun, but it's important. It is an important video. We'll cut it out.
And in it, you'll also see John Neal, who is the owner of White Rabbit Books here in Greensboro, and who actually just donated a large collection to us as well. So,
yeah.
So there's that. So.
So people in Greensboro were given something tonight that most of us take for granted. Gays and lesbians were given special protection against discrimination.
It came from city council members, but not until after a great deal of debate. Brad Jones tells us the decision carries strong reaction from both sides of the issue.
For everybody, peace, love, respect. For everybody.
These gay activists say they're probably the most frequent victims of bias and hate. They feel discrimination in housing and employment is directed at them because of their sexual preference.
We've had very many people come in to testify about employment loss of housing, assaults, vandalism, those kinds of things that happen regularly in Greensboro.
That's why they packed council chambers in Greensboro, demanding a change in the city's personnel policy, as well as a law against discrimination.
Sears, American Express, AT&T, RJR, IBM, ARA Services, Merrill Lynch, and JCPenney are only a few of the many corporations that have added sexual orientation to their non-discrimination policy.
The lone opponent to the proposed changes based his argument in theology.
This book teaches us what is moral and immoral. This book goes with this document, the Constitution of the United States. And there's not a thing in the Constitution of the United States that gives protection or condones immorality.
The issue of U.S. citizenship, it has absolutely nothing to do with religion. It has absolutely nothing to do with sex.
By a vote of 5 to 4, council adopted the change in personnel policy, outlawing discrimination by reason of sexual preference, but delayed any change in the city's laws.
This is a win. The city council did decide to include sexual orientation in its personnel policy. The 5 members who voted for it were very courageous.
Afterward, protesters promised they'll remember who voted for what on Election Day. Estimates of the number of gay people in Greensboro run as high as 20,000, and while that may sound high to some, the people here tonight feel that anti-discrimination laws will give more gay men and women reason to come out of the closet and make their true feelings known. In Greensboro, Brad Jones, News 2 Tonight.
The National Gay and Lesbian Task Force recorded more than 7,000 anti-gay incidents last year nationwide. Nearly 900 of them happened in North Carolina. Gay activists say that's far too many, and as far as they're concerned, it's reason enough for establishing anti-discrimination law.
Out of the closet and into the PowerPoint. So this wasn't the end. Obviously, a lot more happened over the next couple of years, and discrimination clearly has not gone away. 30 years later, if we can look at the next slide.
Some people in Greensboro were given...
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot that I think I have something out of order in my notes. So we're on Stacy now.
Oh, okay. We're going to wrap it up so people have time for questions too, but we wanted to show you some of the documentation efforts that were being done with groups like Gaggle, because they knew they needed this documentation if they were going to go in front of politicians and present their case and try to get equal rights. So you can see examples of some of the discrimination that was self-reported. And yes, these are incredibly sad, but this was important information to collect. So the documentation project was one of the projects that Gaggle had participated in. Also be aware we have material related to PFLAG and other local organizations. And one of our favorite oral histories was one of the movers and shakers for civil rights in our areas with Lenny Gerber. So Lenny and Pearl was a faculty member here in the Department of Physical Education, and Lenny went off to become a civil rights lawyer. And you can hear her talking about her transition into the Triad area and the discrimination she faced in her oral history, as well as some of the cases she had worked on. One of the things we also wanted to capture was people's personal lives, because people are just living their lives and not everyone is fighting for civil rights 100% of the time. So in addition to Pearl and Lenny's, the information in the oral history, we also have a spectacular collection of photos about Pearl and Lenny just spending their lives together. And if you go downstairs near the reference desk, there's a display case that actually has the yarmulke from Pearl and Lenny's wedding at Beth David Synagogue. Yes, and we're going to show you Sappho in a minute. Continuing with people living their lives, David.
Yeah, I'm going to admit to the fact that, yes, that is me. And this slide is not just about documenting my unfortunate experiments with hair over the years, but it's to show you some of the kind of things we're trying to collect in this project to preserve. In addition to the big stuff, we just want families and everyday life moments, that kind of thing. I was at an event recently where someone said something that stuck with me. All these pictures are nice, but where are the pictures of Black kids opening Christmas presents and playing in the snow? And that kind of tends to go to a lot of underserved and marginalized communities. We tend to focus mainly on the activism and the protests and all the newsworthy stuff, but most people don't live most of their lives this way. Same-sex couples buy houses, and non-binary people celebrate holidays, and Hmong families have family reunions. And that's the kind of thing that we need to be capturing too, just to show how people live their lives in their communities. And that's sort of what this is all about. And well, hair.
And we do want to let you know we have many pets represented in our collection. So one of our pleasures doing oral history was actually going out and meeting people's animals and playing with them, as well as getting more animal pictures in our collection, because how many jobs can you do that with? And if you're interested in looking at more in our collection, feel free to take a look at the digital collection. And here is the information. If you would like to contribute to the project or find out more, feel free to contact either David or myself. All right. So does anyone have any questions?
Well, we're waiting for the, inevitable 45-second lag.
Mhm.
I have two. So you said this turned more into an oral history project. Do you have any ideas why, or can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's because, first of all, people were not turning out for our scanning days. So what we started to do was talk to the people we did have contacts with, and they put us into communication with other people. We realized we had some good information about advocacy organizations and social justice organizations and the people working in that, but just not regular people. So that is kind of how we transitioned into oral histories. We realized that was going to have to be the next step. We did start with the people who probably were a bit more front facing in a lot of these initiatives, and then kind of moved on to people who were just living their lives. So we tried to get as much representation as we could.
And we'd love more. So if you know anybody, send them our way.
Okay, here's my second question. So I just happen to know that UNC Charlotte is doing, an oral, I think it's mostly oral history project of the local queer community. And I also happen to know that the Durham Public Library has a big local similar collection. Is there any, what's the word I want? Interaction between y'all, or maybe any other national or even international similar collections to, I don't know, have a clearinghouse as such?
Not so much. We scoped this to be very local because we knew there were other projects in other places. And yes, we do know of these other organizations or other initiatives and the people involved with them, but they kind of stick to their areas and we stick to our areas, which is roughly defined as the triad. We do have some overlapping material just because the more major cities, a lot of people would go to those. So like our Triad Pride Chorus came out of really an initiative of people going to Raleigh to the chorus there and then deciding to form their own here. So there is a little bit of overlap in terms of content, but not in working with each other.
Okay, do you all know anything besides the Durham and Charlotte projects?
I think, oh, go ahead, David.
I was actually going to say I don't know of a lot, but for some reason I have a vague feeling there might have been something going on in Asheville at some point.
Yeah, Asheville, I think, is the only other one. I think something has been started. When you get out of those major city areas, you get into more conservative areas where it's harder to start a project like that.
So arguably much more necessary.
Yes.
But yeah, I agree that there could be a lot more cooperation between the different projects. I think, at some point we really should talk together and come to sort of at least some sort of central portal that brings all of this stuff together in one interface. And as Patrick noted earlier, it is all added to the Digital Public Library of America, but maybe something that's a little more standalone and digestible. But
have you all had any pushback, negative commentary, pearl clutching?
Not really.
Yeah, I don't recall. No, I don't remember any.
Yeah, I mean, within the oral history interviews themselves, there were areas where people didn't want to go, but externally, no, nothing really. Even when we got fairly good newspaper coverage of an exhibit related to about a year and a half back when we had the physical exhibit in the library. Well, it was longer than that.
Yeah, I'm surprised the gay nightlife exhibit didn't get any pushback.
Yeah.
But no, people aren't bothering us, or if they're not paying attention to us, one of the two.
They're just saying those flaky UNCG people.
Or they may just be expecting it because we're UNC gay. Yeah.
Yeah. There's
Oh,
that.
those kids.
Yeah.
All right. Who are you? Is there any particular subpopulation that you're pursuing to add to the collection?
Yes, definitely queer people of color. They face greater discrimination, so it's harder to get people to participate and like be on camera. There's a fear of being recognized. So certainly queer people of color, also more trans identities. We have had a few participants, but we would like to have more participants in that area. You know, any age group from 18 to onward is fine. We do have a lot of older people represented because that's where we started out. But we would like to have more generational representation.
18 is there's a age limit.
Yeah, so their parent does not have to sign a consent form.
Okay. I don't think I missed any questions. No, I don't think so. So just last chance for questions.
Yeah, and happy LGBTQ History Month, everyone.
Thank you. And do we still do National Coming Out Day on the 11th?
I think they do. I know they do a coming out ceremony during the Pride Week here, which is celebrated in March. I don't know if I haven't heard of one in October.
And I couldn't participate anyway because I also donated my National Coming Out Day t-shirt to Stacy. So.
Oh,
Yeah.
Stacy, you just take it. You just take everything at David's.
Pretty much, if you stand close to me and are still for too long, something's going to disappear.
So everyone's been warned for the rest of in the rest of the library. Keep moving when you see Stacy. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions. I really appreciate this. This is great. Appreciate you collecting what I consider, you know, my history too. Community projects are amazing, underdocumented communities. You guys are doing a great service for history and for representation. So thank you all.
Oh, thank you all so much. And thank you for attending.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh,
all.
wait,
And,
sorry. There's Shelby's coming in with the late question. Have you all
Yeah, so we do want to capture more about the drag scene in Greensboro, and because there's the performers tour, there's going to be some overlap. Right now, our primary artist we have represented is Marilyn Rivers, and if you have to have a drag performer represented, she's the one. She's fabulous. So yes, if you know any drag queens who would be interested in talking to us, they do not have to get dressed up, but they can if they want to. We would love to do an oral history with them, or maybe get photographs and put them in the collection.
or drag kings, right?
Or drag queen, drag anything.
Kings, drag dogs, whatever.
Yeah,
we
drag dogs,
probably won't go with drag racers on this collection.
Oh, David.
unless they're LGBTQ and
Yeah.
from our area.
Okay, whoa, all right. Okay, there are standards. So Stacy's scarf is nice too.
Thank you,
yes.
Scott.
Yes. All right. Well, I think that's it. So thank you. Have a great weekend and go Gays.
And everyone have a great Canadian Thanksgiving on Monday.
That was a Megan Rapinoe shout out. So, all right. Thank you.